Hey everybody, it's Robyn and welcome to my channel. So if you recognize this fella, chances are you grew up in the 70s and 80s headbanging to heavy metal. This one's for all you headbangers. Today we are caking Eddie the Head from Iron Maiden's Power Slave album. So let's get caking. So for today's cake, we're using one extra thick 10-inch chocolate cake layer, and we don't actually have to level this one first because I used that low and slow method and it baked up nice and flat, but I do want to torte it into two separate layers so we can add a nice thick layer of this delicious chocolate American buttercream. And for anyone who would like to know how it's made, I will link the video to how to make my easy American buttercream in that description box below. Now once I've added a nice generous layer of this frosting, I'm going to smooth it out and then use a cake lifter to apply my second layer into place. So now I'm going to take this stencil that I've created and we are going to place this on the top of our assembled cake. Now some of you will notice that I don't actually have a cake board under there yet because I don't want to accidentally cut into it while I'm carving my cake, and I have a cake board made exactly the same shape as the cake. And I just personally find it easier to cut the cake and then apply it to the cake board as opposed to applying it to the cake board and then cutting the cake. But you guys can do it whatever way you're comfortable with, and you also don't have to use a fitted cake board. You can use a round one or whatever shape you like. Okay, so once we have the main shape of the cake taken care of, we also have a few lines we need to cut into the top of the cake. So we're going to mark off the outline of the face, his eyes, his mouth, and whatnot. And as you can see, I started with a serrated knife, but I'm going to switch over to a small craft knife to cut out the eyes and the mouth, so that way we get nice, crisp, clean lines. So now we're just going to pull that stencil away and it's time to attach our cake to our cake board. So using that same chocolate American buttercream, we're going to smear some on our cake board to act as a bit of a glue for our cake to stick to. And now that we have our cake into place, we can start carving the face. So starting with the mouth and the eyes first, I'm using my craft knife because I find it much easier to cut these areas with a small blade. Now once we get those areas taken care of, I'm going to move on to that neck portion, and here's where you might want to switch over to a bigger knife to get in there a little tiny bit deeper. Alright, so once we've taken care of the facial features, we want his face to protrude a little bit, so it's time to start carving his headpiece. So starting at the top of the head, we're going to cut it fairly thick, and then it's going to gradually get thinner as it reaches the bottom of the face. Then we're just going to round out that face a little tiny bit before finishing off our carving by cutting out where his body will be, because we really want that headpiece to stand out. Alright, so now it's time to cover our cake with some frosting. So I'm using that same chocolate American buttercream as we used before, but now I'm using a flexible smoother to apply my buttercream, so that way I can get it on there nice and thin and smooth without tearing my cake to pieces. And I do like these way better than any of my spatulas, so I do highly recommend buying some or making some like I do out of some flexible cutting boards or a piece of acetate, or even some cardstock will do in a pinch as well. But I much prefer making mine because then you can make them whatever shape you need. And as you can see, I've made a small one for the face, and then I've made a tiny one for inside the eyes and the mouth. And you know what? The right tool can make any job easy, and this is definitely one of those tools. Now once we finish covering our cake with buttercream, we want to pop it in the fridge. But before I do, I want to smooth the entire thing using my fingertips to get all those little rough areas nice and smooth. Now you can use the paper towel method, that's perfectly fine, but I prefer to use my fingertips so I can really see what I'm doing. So once our cake has been chilling for a bit, we are going to go ahead and prepare a nice big piece of fondant to cover it with. And you're going to want to roll this out nice and thick because we have a lot of molding to do. And when you mold fondant onto a cake, you do have to stretch it quite a bit, and you'll want that excess play in the fondant so you don't tear it or push your tools all the way through. Okay, so now that we have our cake covered up, I'm going to go over the different tools I'll be using. So first off, they're called Dresden Tools, and these are very handy when molding and shaping fondant or any kind of a Play-Doh type substance. And this one here that I'm using is a balling tool. So there are a couple of different kinds of these. We have ones with balls on straight stems, and we also have ones that sit at a bit of a curve like this one does. And these are great for, as you can see, accentuating deep smooth lines where you don't want to tear the fondant, you just want to manipulate it. And there's so many different kinds. See, this one is a bit of a cylinder and that one is a bit of a cone, and there's the one with the ball that sits on a straight stem. And we can't forget our hands because we'll also be using these quite a bit, as well as these are our most important tools. And last but not least, our Dresden veining tool. And I really love this one because it is so universal. We're going to use it to mark off all the fine details on this cake, which are really going to make it pop and come to life, like all the stripes on the headdress, as well as these really cool wrinkles. And this tool is actually the #1 reason why you want to make your fondant nice and thick, because this one's a little bit sharp and it will tear if you go too deep, so be careful. Okay, so now that we have this guy looking old as dirt, it is time to give him some gnarly teeth. So I'm going to roll a little tiny snake shape that's fat on one end and skinny on the other, and we're just going to fit that into the mouth and use any tool that you might feel comfortable with to push that in and mark off the teeth. And as you can see, my veining tool is my favorite tool and does the job perfectly. So while I finish up working on the cake, I just wanted to take a moment to remind all of you that any of the tools that I've used during the making of this video, you can find links to those as well as tons of other great baking supplies down in my description box below. And I would like to remind you that these are affiliate links. I do not get paid if you click, only if you buy. And if you do buy, thank you. Even the tiniest of contributions helps my channel to grow. Okay, so most of our detail is finished. We just have a couple of little things to do. We're going to add this little strip of fondant across the forehead because this one would have been a little bit difficult to carve. And then we're also going to add a little oval in the center of the forehead, which is going to have what looks to be 2 screws in the top of it, which we're going to carve with our Dresden tool. And once I've finished this, we're just going to add a little bit of detail inside the eyes so we know where to paint, which is actually the next thing we're going to do. And I hope you guys are as excited as I am. This is my favorite part. And we're going to start with a little bit of white food color, and I like to use Wilton. So we're going to add some to our palette, as well as some lemon yellow and some chocolate brown. We're just going to mix those 3 colors together until we get a nice zombie-like jaundiced beige color, I guess. So you'll just keep mixing a blend of those 3 colors until you reach something you're happy with. And I'm just going to use a small fluffy brush so that way I can get into all those little creases and wrinkles. And then once we have the entirety of the face fully painted, I'm going to switch over to a darker color, which is not quite the full strength of my brown, but I did water it down a little bit. And we're going to get into all those nooks and crannies and wrinkles, and we're really going to make this pop and come to life. Or should I say back from the dead? I don't know. Anyway, don't forget to color in the little spots on either side of the neck as well to make it appear like there's some depth. Okay, so next up we are going to paint some blue. So I've mixed up my AmeriColor Royal Blue Gel Food Color with some of my white Wilton food color, and I've blended those together until I have a nice light blue. And I'm just painting this on with a flat watercolored paintbrush, which I've never used for paint, obviously, only cake gel food color. And we are going to paint all the alternate stripes on the headdress, as well as on the body and that little strip at the forehead as well. Now, there was one thing that kept happening that I thought I would make note of for you guys. My blue and my white kept separating a little bit, so I had to keep mixing it on the palette, and I had to be careful not to paint it on there too thick as well, because I noticed as it started to dry, the colors kind of wanted to separate a little bit anywhere that the paint was a little bit too heavy, so that's definitely something for you guys to pay attention to as well. Okay, so with all of our blue filled in and the face a little bit dry, I thought now was a good time to work on the eyes. So we did black for the pupil, and for the iris we did a gradient from orange to red, and then we finished it off with black around the outside of those eyes. And that went all the way to the very edge to fill it in and make it look like they're little black pits with just little beady red glowing eyes. And I think that looks pretty cool as is, but it does get a lot cooler looking as it dries. And now we are going to add that little chin piece, and I thought I was done with the blue, but I guess I lied. But now that we really are, we can switch over to our final color and start painting all of our gold stripes. So the gold dust that I'm using is called Lissel's Gold Powder, and I did purchase this on Amazon. It is advertised as food grade gold powder, so it's not just non-toxic, it is actually edible, which I find to be pretty hard to find in a gold that looks really nice. And I find this one looks absolutely beautiful whether it is wet or dry dusted. It is one of my favorites and I use it all the time. And I am not sponsored to say this, I just absolutely love it and I wanted to share it with you guys, and I will provide a link down below if there's one that I can find. Well, that is it for today, guys. I hope this cake was your jam and you've had a head-banging good time. And if any of you happen to recreate this little blast from the past, I hope you guys kill it and it turns out even better than mine. So I hope you found the video to be super helpful, and if you did and would love to show some appreciation, please don't forget to leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, send a super thanks if you're able, or even just leave us a like. No action is too small. They all help my little channel grow, and I appreciate them so much, guys, because without your support, I wouldn't be able to keep caking all the time. So thank you, and thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.